Hi friends, my name is Oksana and today we will be talking about eyeshadow palettes, of course, and I want to rank the palettes that I've recently tried from many brands in these videos, from worst to the best. There will be 11 palettes in this video, and I must say that the last place, it will be the disappointing palette, but starting from the 10s and moving onwards, you will see the palettes that I mostly enjoy. Of course, I will let you know which I enjoy, which I'm not. So let's get started from the last place, the worst palette that I've tried in the last 3 months, I believe. It will be Mcgrath palette, Mothership 11. So I got this palette, thanks God, with the discount. The code that worked on the website, it was thanks30, and I believe that it was a glitch on the website because the palette wasn't rolled out yet by the Mcgrath team, but still we were able to get the palette shipped to us on pretty early stages. So I'm very glad that I got this palette on the discount because I want to be short, so just 2 sentences and I will describe my disappointment. So it's $128 if we are talking about the full price and no special shades. So if you know, Mcgrath is famous for her special shades in her Mothership's palette, and this is what made the palette worth $128 for some of us. And in this palette, even though there are no special shades, still this quad, it's not perfect. So this red pen, it's very crunchy on the lid. It emphasizes the texture of the lid. It's not appealing at all. And if we are talking about this astral shade, the lavender shimmer, then this is too dark for me. And also other 6 pens, they are too repetitive because we've already seen this color story from Pat, and just overall disappointment came from the actual color story of the palette, because this is already the 5th Mothership that Pat has already released with the same kind of the color story. I'm not a fan of rosy tones at all, and I think that for this price point you can't go with just a basic palette, because there are many basic palettes on the market that the user can reach for and can decide whether they want to have this $128 palette or not. I know that there is always a sale on Mcgrath website, but I think that even $80 is too much for this kind of palette with the quality issues, and if you can get the basic palette for a better deal, of course. New brand of the month for me is Beauty Bay. So Beauty Bay is the website where they have a lot of makeup brands that we love, guys, and they have their home brand, which is by Beauty Bay, and I got 2 9 pans palette, one with the greeny tones, another one with the blue tones, and number 10 it will be a green tones eyeshadow palette, which is Earthy. So whilst I'm left satisfied with the quality of the matte, especially considering that there are dark green mattes that can be very hard to produce, but I like the quality of the matte. I like the shimmers. They are very dimensional on the lid. They are not getting hard panned, but still it's just that the tones on me, they are not as appealing, and this palette looks a little bit grungy, too grungy, I might say, and this is why this palette is ranking as number 10. And number 9, this is Midnight palette in blue tones. I like the color story of this one more. It's more appealing on the eyes, and even though it's another pair of shades that are pretty hard to produce in makeup industry, you are still left with a good quality. And I must say that the shimmers are just beautiful, and I like to pair this palette with a yellow gel liner in the waterline. I have some looks that I love when I worked with this palette, and this is ranking number 9 just because this is very bright and I am a basic girl, and yeah, this is basically the only fault of this palette, but in terms of the quality, no complaints, no issues at all. Then number 8 it will be the palette from Jewels and from Oden's I, Jewels and Gem. I like the packaging of the palette very much, and I must say that when I first saw it on the website, I was very attached to the color story because it looks different from what we've already seen on the market. By the way, this is one of the most recent releases from Oden's I, and this is the first palette that I've tried from them. I wasn't familiar with the eyeshadow formula. I can see that they are trying to play with different textures of shimmers, and my favorite one is Swoon, which is multi-chrome. I like this shade to apply on the darker base or even on its own. Also, there is a duochrome exhilaration, which is this purple to green shift, and I don't like it because it's quite muddy looking, and I believe that this is because of the black base and the shift as well, as it's from purple to dark green. Then dark mattes, especially this transition one, Rapture and Purple Intoxication, they are harder to blend, they are harder to work with. This is not something that I'm surprised about, but still, this is just the fact that this palette is not that easy to work with, and this is why it's ranking number 8. And also, overall, the color story ended looking on me a bit more earthy than I expected, and this is also the reason why it's ranking a little bit lower and not on the top of the list. Number 7, Delicious Delights from Cosmic Brushes, and this is the palette that I reviewed on my channel, so if you'd like to see more looks that I have created with this palette, then of course you're welcome to check it out. I will leave the link down below, and the feedback on this one will be the same: beautiful mattes, beautiful color story, dimensional shimmers with different textures. This palette is very different in terms of layout of the palette that I would prefer, but for some reason it ended up to be one of my favorites. Inside this palette there are different textures, and this is what I like the most because it makes her very interesting to play with. Best colorful palette for me, yet as I'm inclined more to the basic color story on my day-to-day basis, this is why this palette is ranking number 7 and not on top of the list, but I don't have any quality issues with this one at all. Then number 6 is Stone and Rock palette, also from Oden's I, and the reason why it's ranking higher than the Jewels and Gem one is because it's easier for me to work with this palette in terms of the color story, in terms of the shades, and even though I thought that I'm not a fan of green color story, I'm inclined to use this palette on my everyday basis. I like that there is even the duochrome shade, which is called High Spirits, that I can implement in my daily routine makeup looks, and I like how it looks on my lid. It doesn't emphasize the texture, and it doesn't look too bright for my office looks. If it can be an office look with a duochrome like green to deep blue, of course, but still it's just a very beautiful palette. Overall, I like the color story, I like the blending, I like the shimmery side of the palette. I like everything about that, to be honest. Of course, there are some cons as always, but pros are stronger. Then I have number 5, and it will be Natasha Denona Yucca palette. I must say that Natasha Denona gave us the most exciting launches this year because she released 3 palettes that got to the beauty community, and I believe that this is the reason why Natasha Denona is still on top of the list. When we are talking about the new releases, new launches, you always keep an eye on the Instagram page of Natasha Denona herself or of her beauty brand. And whilst I'm not a fan of her matte formula here, I don't like specifically the dark mattes. Shimmers make this palette worth for me. So it is said that there is a new formula that Natasha Denona presented us in this palette, and I want to see this formula in her upcoming launches as well. They are absolutely stunning. The level of sparkle, brightness, shifts is what I look for in every palette. Although Plantasia, which is this shade in the top corner, it's very similar to the shade Aurora, which is in pastel palette, and I like pastel palette very much as well. I still absolutely adore this palette, and I just admit that Natasha is doing a great job when it comes to the color story and when it comes to creating the new formula and catering the new formula to us. Then number 4 is another exciting launch, because it's again from Natasha Denona, and this is the palette that I have the review on my channel. This is Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I admit that I don't have that much love for this palette as I had for Glam when it first released in its heyday, but I can't deny that Natasha did a beautiful story with creating again the formula that will cater to the most of people, like to the beauty audience, which are of different levels, which are seeking for something different, somebody for something bright, somebody for something more basic. But because he featured her new sparkling wet formula, I believe this palette made her sold out on Sephora, and who doesn't need another basic palette, right? But of course there are pros and cons, and the cons being there are a lot of similar shades in this palette. This is what I don't like. This is what I can't forgive for the palette that has like 15 shades and costs $69. I think that for this price point we need to have something different, and there are too many similar shades. If you want to see the comparison with the Glam on the eyelid, and of course if you want to see which similar shades are presented in this palette, that of course just check out my review that I have on my channel. So very beautiful, but it won't be my favorite because of this issue. I can't enjoy the palette if there are too many similar shades. It just drives me nuts, to be honest. Then number 3, again Natasha Denona, again very exciting launch from her, mini Starlette, and I believe that this is one of the best minis that Natasha Denona introduced us, because like it has everything that you need. So it's perfect in tones, in textures, in dimension, in blending, in everything basically. And this is why I think that you need to get this palette. I also have a review on this one, and I won't be very long talking about this mini Starlette palette. Oh, and by the way, this palette features shades that are already existing in her Lila and Star palette. Those are very pricey, so I think that this is just a very good deal from Natasha Denona to try her formula and to have the good quality palette in your collection. Then number 2, right? Yes, number 2, it will be Plain Jane from Adept Cosmetics. And whilst Minka from Adept Cosmetics is disappointment of the year for me, yes, I will say that, but yes, then this one, it's my favorite palette of all, almost of all, because we have number 1 still, right? Even though it doesn't have a matte, as you can see, it's all shimmery palette, and for some reason palettes that are ranking on top of the list, they are all shimmery palettes. You will see why in a moment, but I like to pair it with another matte. I like to just grab one shimmer from here or 2 shimmers from here, as many as I'd like, and just combine them on my lid. I like how it looks on the lid, so it doesn't emphasize the texture. Again, they are very sparkly, some of them very creamy, some of them duochromes, some of them multichromes, again different textures. You can play with this palette, I believe, for a very long time, because it introduces you to a very different formula that Adept has. And of course there are also cons. There are some similar shades, but for some reason I like this palette very, very much, and I think that the reason being for that is just modern type of shimmers, not just creamy metallics. I don't like creamy metallics to be in the palette like the majority of the palette. I like the creamy metallic when it's necessary maybe, but I will definitely prefer duochromes, sparkles, multichromes, as we are already moving towards, you know, another generation, and this palette just offers you a lot of different formulas. Then number one, we are already here. So number one, where you are? Here you are. It's Isamaya Industrial Palette 02, I believe, right? Yeah. So this is the brand that I also never tried, and this is the first product that I've tried from Isamaya, and it happens to be that this is the eyeshadow palette, the love of my life. And just look at this stunning layout, color story. Oof, I like it very much. So what I like about this one, again, it's an all shimmery palette. It has different textures. There are duochromes, there are multichromes, there are even satins that you can use as mattes if you're not afraid to do so, and if you just like the look of the satins on your eyelid. So there is everything that you need basically, because again, this palette, it just features, I believe, every formula that you might come across in on the shimmery side in the beauty industry, because we have glittery type of shades, we have sparkles, we have like iridescent type of shades, we have foiled metallics, we have satins, we have duochromes, we have again everything. Very pricey, very pricey. I didn't see this one on discount for a very long time, and it was sold out also. So I got on Selfridges, so I got these from the official website, and I got these for 10% off, which is not a lot, but at least something. So I think that chances are being disappointed with this palette very low, so you should try this palette. I believe that this is everything that I wanted to tell you about. I hope that you will find this video helpful, interesting, engaging, and let me know in the comments your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next videos.